I bought a record player in my first week in Hong Kong in 2008 in January, and the first record I bought was a record called Deja Vu by Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. It was on a label called Classic Records, which is a reissue label, an audiophile label. So it's a really high quality, highly remastered version of this album from 1970. Sounded fantastic. And I thought, wow, all vinyl sounded that great. Well, when I was a kid, I started buying my own music when I was about 15 years old. I used to buy cassette tapes. And I collected a lot of those, and I kind of was one of these kids who just really, really loved music. I'd grown up listening to lots of music on the radio. So my mum and dad were always having the radio playing. And then when I was a kid, my mum and dad had some records. So we played those a lot when we were kids. And then, so I collected a lot of cassettes up until about 1988. And then in 1988, when I was at university, I brought my first CD player. And so then I built a very big CD collection, and I collected CDs from 1988 until 2008. So that's 20 years. I'm a writer as well. I like writing, and I listen to a lot of music. And I think that if you listen to music, it's a really good thing if you're a writer, because writing involves rhythm and understanding and hearing the rhythms of language. So if you listen to a lot of music, I think there's quite a strong parallel between the rhythms of music and hearing rhythms in language when you write. I went to New York in 2012, and before I went to New York, I looked up events, musical events happening in New York, and I came across this event called Classic Album Sundays. So Classic Album Sundays is an event where they get a really nice stereo system and they rent this back room of a restaurant, and they put up all these chairs and they play one classic album, and you play it right through from start to finish, and everybody must sit there and listen, and there's no talking.
Well, Blair is very super passionate about collecting and listening to music. He spends a lot of time listening. So I think he probably has a lot more broader interests across lots of different types of music, and he listens much more deeply than me, probably. I'm much more of a traditionalist, like mainstream music, rock and pop. But Blair sort of got me into jazz music. I mean, I used to play the trumpet when I was much younger, and I started to listen to jazz, but I never spent much time. So when I met Blair, then I started really listening to a lot of jazz. And now having the shop, I'm listening to all kinds of music, but I've got a long way to go to catch up to Blair. So. During COVID, all the live music was shut down in Hong Kong, so a lot of the bars and live music venues, they couldn't, have these events. So they were asking people if they could help by doing other events. So we decided that we would take Sonic Aviators to public. So basically we would try and recreate Blair's Lounge, but in a bigger scale, in a bar or like an event place. So we did that for just over a year, about a year and a half. And every month we'd have an event, and we'd choose different genres of music, or we might do, for example, we did Kate Bush versus Madonna. We had a competition. One person played Madonna, one person played Kate Bush, and then we had to vote to see which we liked the most. Kate Bush won, by the way.
Well, I guess the vinyl thing is, the reason why people like vinyl. And the biggest message that I have with vinyl is that it's human. Like scientifically, it's human. When you're listening to Spotify or a CD, you're listening to a recording of humanity, not humanity. So when you were listening to the vinyl in there, what you were hearing were human vibrations that were created and then vibrated down a needle onto the platter and then out to the speakers. It's all vibrations that are coming from one human that could have been recorded, in 1920s. Hong Kongers love high quality music. They're only second, I think, to Japan when it comes to the amount of equipment that they buy and how much they spend on equipment. So it's important for them to have very, very high quality records to play.
The interest is still growing, but it's smaller independent stores like what we're doing. So, I think some of the stores never finished, and they're still there, but they're small stores. And then now we're starting to see a few new stores arrive. So that's good news.
When I first came to Hong Kong, we had HMV, and we had Hong Kong Records, and then we had this other audiophile store that I shop at called Shunchong Records, and also White Noise Records. So we have these 4 record stores that were the main ones that I used to visit a lot. But then over the years, Hong Kong Records disappeared, so did HMV, and they were 2 big stores. So that trend would make you think that the format of music was dying out. And I suppose that the major format for sales of music was still CD for many, many years, until very recently. I think like just last year might have been the first time that vinyl outsold CDs. So, it's sort of ups and downs. I don't know if it's getting bigger, but it's not getting smaller. Yeah. Okay, so when I was younger, I bought this album by The Cure called Disintegration. This came out in 1989, and it came out in CD, and I bought it, and I listened to this album a lot in 1989, but I continued listening to it a lot. And I used to listen to this album when I went to bed almost every night for many, many years, because it was a really good album to put on and kind of fall asleep to. So I played this album a lot, and I suppose I have always thought of this album as being my favourite album of all time. It's a fantastic album. It's very moody and atmospheric, and it's very popular as well. There's an episode of South Park, which is an American cartoon, and there's a episode where Robert Smith, who's the lead singer of The Cure and the songwriter, there's a cartoon version of him on the show, and at the very end of the show, the characters from South Park, they yell out, "Disintegration is the best album ever." So it is a really popular album, and I don't play my vinyl copy so much because it's spread across 4 sides, and I've played it so much in the past I don't really need to listen to it that much anymore, but it's still kind of my favourite album. An album that I discovered in the last few years is this incredible album by Charles Mingus. It's called Mingus I'm a big fan of Charles Mingus because he's a jazz artist, he's a bassist, and he writes his own music, but his music is kind of like jazz symphonies. So it's quite complex jazz music. It's not really improvised on the spot. It's kind of composed jazz music, and absolutely amazing. This record is probably his best, or one of his best. Mingus The reason I like this one so much is because this is an audiophile version, which means it plays at 45 RPM. It's pressed on very special high quality vinyl, and the remastering is really state of the art. So not only is it a great album, but it's a fantastic sounding album as well. And when this came out a couple of years ago, I played it a lot, and it's one of my favourite jazz albums. Absolutely fantastic.